Morning people, welcome back to F Politics. This Labour government wants to officially label Palestine Action as a terror group for breaking into the Brize Norton Air Force Base and spray painting some jets, rendering some of their engines unusable. And so I have to say something that makes me really uncomfortable, and that's that this government are enemies of the people. It makes me uncomfortable saying that because I, like many Remainers, condemn the Daily Mail for calling the judges in 2016 enemies of the people. Because calling your political opponents enemies of the people or unpatriotic is pretty much the go-to strategy of populists and fascists. And Brexiteers weaponized phrases like enemies of the people, traitors to the people, against anybody who didn't support a specific extreme version of Brexit that only a section of Brexit voters even wanted, and which they themselves had promised people would never happen. It was also wrong to call Remainers enemies of the people because Remain voters and Leave voters weren't enemies. They were citizens of the same country who happened to disagree politically. And now the political issue is whether or not the UK continues to sell weapons to Israel, which has been using its weapons to kill tens of thousands of people across the Middle East. And the majority of the British people, by a ratio of about 3-to-1, wants us to stop doing that. So blocking the sale of weapons to Israel is a cause that the majority of British people support, and that is precisely the cause that Palestine Action was defending when they spray painted those planes. So when I say that Palestine Action is a voice of the people, I'm not being populist, I'm being statistically accurate. But I wouldn't go so far to say that anybody who opposes Palestine Action is an enemy of the people. But what the government is doing now by labeling Palestine Action as terrorists is giving themselves the license to treat those people as enemies of the state. For what? Vandalism? No, because vandalism isn't a terror offense. Hell, as the amazing Zoe Gardner pointed out, there have been several examples of people damaging Air Force planes for protest, but not being convicted as terrorists.
In 1996, 4 women vandalized an RAF jet, preventing its travel to Indonesia for complicity in the East Timor genocide. They were found not guilty. In 2003, activists sabotaged fuel tankers to disrupt US warplanes reaching Iraq. It was Keir Starmer, who was the lawyer who defended them on the basis that they were acting for the greater good to prevent war crimes from taking place. And in 2017, 2 activists attempted to disarm Typhoon jets to prevent them reaching Saudi Arabia and to take part in war crimes in Yemen. And they were again found not guilty on the basis that they were attempting to prevent war crimes, which is the true intention, actually, of this group.
Terrorism, by definition, has to be about spreading fear among the people, that they might get hurt too. They spray painted some planes. Who was scared? So it can't be the nature of the action itself that made it terrorism in the eyes of the government, so it has to be the cause. This government is branding Palestine Action as terrorists because their actions oppose the sale of weapons to Israel, something the majority of the British people also oppose. So the government is labeling a view held by the majority of British people as terrorist in nature and hostile to the British state. So when I call the governments enemies of the people, that's not a conclusion that I've just come to, I'm just taking them at their word. Palestine Action is a protest group. They engage in civil disobedience, and sometimes that's going to involve criminal damage, as is almost every significant political protest in the history of global democracy. And it's through those protests that we got pretty much all the rights that we rely on today. But yes, that damage is by definition criminal, so nobody's going to call the government fascist for punishing vandalism as vandalism. We pipe up when the level of punishment shows the government's priorities are skewed. Like after they toppled the statue of slave trader Edward Colston and threw it in the river in Bristol, the government changed the law so you could get 10 years in prison for damaging a statue, when the punishment for rape starts at 5 years. Similarly, branding an entire group as terrorists simply because a couple of their members spray painted a plane again shows the government's priorities are skewed. Not to mention, alongside sending weapons to Israel, the government is also training IDF soldiers here in the UK. So it is actively engaging in a conflict on the opposite side to where the majority of British people's sympathies lie. Because on balance, Brits have more sympathy for Palestinians than Israelis, because Palestinians have been killed at a rate 35 times higher than Israelis. Most Palestinians in Gaza have had to either leave their homes or watch them be destroyed. So while it makes me really uncomfortable to call the government enemies of the people, if they're effectively fighting a war against the people that most Brits support and saying that they will be treating people who share the views that most Brits share as enemies of the state, what else am I supposed to call them? I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics so politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.